Now let's review this section. The topics that could be tested here are the differing needs, problems and opportunities of manufacturing businesses, practical problems of startups, finance, location and cash flow, business planning, and lastly, the impact of laws regarding health and safety, employment, consumer protection and competition. The third question we're going to look at is a 15-mark question which requires you to evaluate. Evaluation means to make a judgment based on the evidence given in the case study. The best way to evaluate is to give a final evaluative paragraph. However, you can evaluate throughout your answer as well. Don't forget to also show your knowledge, to apply your knowledge, and to say why your points are important. In other words, analyse as well as evaluate. To help with this, we're going to guide you through the do's and don'ts of answering an evaluation question. Here's the question.
Evaluate the case for and against government intervention to protect staff and customers of new small business such as Ethical Foods Limited.
Remember, evaluate means to make judgments based on the points you have made. Here we have a third level, so the depth of quality of the answer is important. The best way to answer a for and against question is to firstly define terms, then give your arguments for, then the arguments against, and finally an evaluation. Let's consider the case for and against government regulation. So let's start off with a plan like this one. See how it's very clear what I'm going to include in my answer. Remember, you should spend 15 minutes on a 15-mark question. It's a bit like a mini essay. This would be a good answer. Government regulation is when the government intervenes in the market to protect consumers, employees and suppliers by imposing laws. For example, in the case of Ethical Foods Limited, employees are paid minimum wages. It could be argued that if Sue and Chris were not forced to pay minimum wages, they may pay a lower amount to their employees in order to increase profits, which then means they would be exploiting their workforce. Health and safety regulations are another example of government regulation. If these weren't implemented, then Sue and Chris may continue having dangerous hazards in their kitchen. This will allow Ethical Foods Limited to reduce costs and increase profits, but at the expense of possible accidents to staff. These are reasons for government regulation. However, it can be argued that if the staff at Ethical Foods were paid very low wages, they would leave for other jobs, so firms need to pay well. Or that if they were paid on a lower wage, but also given bonuses based on results, they may work harder and not mess up the orders and deliveries. Therefore, regulation can be seen as a hindrance rather than a benefit to a firm. Similarly, Ethical Foods Limited were keen to operate ethically, so health and safety regulations may not be necessary as long as employers are educated in best practice. Overall, regulation may not be necessary for most employers, as they are fair to their customers, employees and their suppliers. However, there's no doubt that some employers will try and reduce costs by treating employees unfairly. They do this by ignoring health and safety and taking time to pay suppliers. For this reason, I believe regulation is necessary because it allows all sides to know their rights and responsibilities to their stakeholders. So, what did our examiner think about this answer? Well, it's an excellent answer again. It defined terms at the beginning of the answer. As we said before, this is good exam technique. There's also one paragraph giving the case for, and another giving the case against government regulation. The facts discussed have been directly applied to the case study. There's analysis throughout, and very importantly, a final evaluative paragraph, which clearly gives a justification for regulation based on the points made. Evaluation is extremely important because it's worth 5 out of 15 marks and can make the difference between a good and an average grade. Could you have changed the answer to argue that regulation isn't necessary? This would have been an equally valid approach. Let's have a look at another evaluative question to deepen our understanding of what the examiners want to hear.
Assess the extent of the problems encountered by Ethical Foods Limited.
Assess the extent of indicates that the question is asking you to evaluate, and in this case means that you are required to consider what problems Ethical Foods have, and to what degree they are a problem. Before you review the answer, pause for a moment and try to plan one yourself. Let's have a look at a good answer to see if your plan was similar to mine. The problems that Ethical Food Limited have are mainly related to their main customer going out of business and being unable to pay the £6,000 they are owed. This is severe because it will impact on their cash flow and will depend on how much of their total sales were tied up with this customer. If most of the sales were tied up with this customer, then cash flow may be affected on a continuous basis and mean Ethical Foods may suffer from poor cash flow. Therefore, they may find paying their suppliers, their bank loan, and for improvements to the kitchen difficult. However, Ethical Foods are expanding and are likely to be finding new customers all of the time, and as a consequence, may not be too inconvenienced. Another problem is the staff. Late orders and mixed up deliveries are increasing, and this may be of a deeper concern because this can affect the reputation and sales of the business. Sue and Chris need to talk to their staff, especially John, and find out what the problems are. It may be the case that extra training is required, or that John has problems of a personal nature. The ordering and delivery situation may therefore be overcome if Sue and Chris can find the cause. One of Ethical Foods' problems is related to their customer who has gone out of business and cannot pay the £6,000 owed. This is a significant problem and may mean cash flow difficulties for them. They have arranged to meet with their bank manager to discuss this situation. However, of more immediate concern is the staffing issue, because if mixed up orders and late deliveries continue, Ethical Foods Limited may find it difficult to replace the £6,000 with future orders from new customers. So, what's the examiner going to say about this answer? This is a good answer, which picks on two main problems of cash flow and staff, and evaluates the extent of these problems. The evaluation is shown throughout the answer and in the final paragraph. Notice that again, there is a final evaluative paragraph, which, as we said before, is good exam style. This time though, there are no business terms to define in the question, but the opening sentence is a good start as it picks on the two main points which are discussed in the rest of this answer.